We have labeled this chapter as to get the best out of life, and the reason for that is because so much of this chapter focuses on verse 2, length of days, long life, and peace shall they add to thee. Verse 10, thy barns will be filled with plenty, thy presses shall burst with new wine. Verse 8, health to thy navel, marrow to thy bones. Verse 13, happy is the man that gets wisdom, that gets understanding. Verse 16, length of days is in wisdom's right hand, in her left hand riches and honor. These aspects of life and enjoying the fruit of life resound in Proverbs chapter 3. In fact, verse 18, she's a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her. Happy is everyone that retaineth her. Those are just a few examples of the emphasis that is placed on getting the best out of life in Proverbs 3. Now we have outlined the chapter thusly: set my words in your heart, verses 1 and 2. Set God as your priority, verses 3 through 12. And when last we spoke, we were looking at verses 13 through 26, setting wisdom as your treasure. Now, there's a point to be made in studying the book of Proverbs that there are different ways to divide, allocate, outline the flow. For instance, one of the more thorough Old Testament commentaries that you'll find is Keil and Delitzsch. It's always fun to sit down and try to read Keil and Delitzsch because so much of their stuff is written in Latin and original Hebrew and Greek that you actually just get to scan over and say, I don't know. Oh, here we go, English again. I can understand this part. That being said, in looking Keil and Delitzsch and their thorough approach outline numerous introductory maskil odes. In other words, a series of verses that connect together as a proverbial song, if you will. And in so doing, they outline chapter 3 differently than we would, but the interesting part of that is each of their maskil odes, as they lay them out, build up to a transition that leads directly into the next. Now, we've kind of divided this topically in a way that corresponds with the songs that they identify, but it's worth noting that there is a sense in which several of these lines of thought are building up to a bit of a crescendo, if you will, and then the next simply picks up at where the previous left off. We'll detail those a bit later, but for now, as we outline this chapter, we've come to verses 13 through 26, and in this section there is a bit of a transition, but that transition continues to focus on the concept of wisdom and setting wisdom as the treasure. When last we spoke, we were looking at begin at verse 19. The Lord by wisdom has founded the earth, by understanding he established the heavens. After emphasizing the need for wisdom, beginning in verses 13 and following, and the benefits of wisdom, verse 19, God used it. As a matter of fact, it was wisdom that God employed when he planned the creation. It was wisdom that God exhibited when he provided and produced the creation. So we take a look at the point being made here. Wisdom is an attribute of God. Wisdom is a trait that God utilized in making this terrestrial ball on which we live in the first place. The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. And it's by his knowledge that life even exists. What do we mean by that? Well, verse 20, by his knowledge the depths are broken up and the clouds drop down the dew. There are certain things that must exist in order for life to exist. One of those is light, and we've been discussing that regularly, and we'll continue to emphasize that concept throughout the course of this year as we talk about the idea of letting our light so shine before men. But another aspect of what's necessary for life to exist is going to be water. By his knowledge, the depths are broken up. By God's knowledge, we have water on the earth. We have water available, accessible. We have water that irrigates. We have water that brings nourishment. And it's by his knowledge that we have water over our heads that drops out of the clouds. It's by God's knowledge that there is liquid water, that there is water vapor. It's by God's knowledge that water vapor can condense, and that condensation becomes liquid water. It's by God's knowledge that so many of these systems exist that we still struggle to endeavor to understand. We speak of things like engineering and reverse engineering. We speak of things such as invention, and we speak of things such as discovery. The fact of the matter is, every invention that man has ever brought about is really reverse engineering. Every invention is really just a matter of discovery. Man has never devised any principle or created any concept that is not a direct result of what God brought into existence. Now, man has perverted some of the aspects of existence that God brought into reality, and as such, there are those things that God does not approve. But the fact of the matter is, when we start thinking about the technology that we have at our fingertips, we start thinking about so much of what we can take for granted today because we're so far developed. Man has been so ingenuitive. All man has ever done is just discover how to use the elements that God put here, discover the ways that those elements interact, discover the ways that the laws and principles that God set at the very beginning have worked since the beginning. By wisdom, God established the earth. By understanding, He founded the heavens. And it's by His wisdom that we even have the waters above us, that we have the waters at our feet. It's by wisdom that everything here exists. Wisdom has come from God. Thus, we come to verse 20, "My son, let them not depart from thine eyes." The word "them" looks back at what was just said in verses 19 and 20. It's by wisdom that God founded the earth. It's by understanding, perception, that He established the heavens. It's by His knowledge that the depths are broken up. Let not them, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, depart from thine eyes. They're attributes of God. Let not them depart from thine eyes. They're part of who He is. Let not them depart from thine eyes. They're part of who we should be. And when we make these attributes of Him who we are, then we're able to keep sound wisdom and discretion. The result of not letting wisdom and understanding and knowledge depart from our eyes is that we preserve and keep and protect the idea of sound wisdom and discretion. The word translated sound wisdom can be connected to the concept of success. It's the idea of the effect of wisdom applied. You want to know what success looks like in life? It's going to be all the money that you can have in the bank, right? The nicest house on the street, the nicest street in the community, the nicest automobiles, the best looking family pictures. That's success, right? Success is going to be reaching the targeted level of status among my neighbors, or reaching the targeted level of promotion in my job. It's interesting that when we follow after wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that does not necessarily preclude being able to enjoy some of the things that we just mentioned. But when we're pursuing those things that we just mentioned at the expense of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, it's a far different existence. How do we measure success? Keep sound wisdom and discretion. This idea of discretion being very similar to the concept of prudence. an idea of the ability to look ahead and take actions that are conducive to a desired outcome. Verse 22, so shall they be life unto thy soul, grace unto thy neck. The English Standard has an adornment unto thy neck. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge are going to be life to the soul and grace to the neck. They're going to make life worth living, make life fulfilling, make life life. Then shalt thou walk in thy way safely, and thy foot shall not stumble. That word translated safely, the American Standard has securely, but it's the idea of confidence. What would you rather have? That massive abode, that prestige, fame, fortune, and be looking over your shoulder all the time wondering when you're going to lose it? Or would you rather have modest security, clean conscience, and an outlook on life that has a confidence in who you are, who your God is, where you're going, and that while you may not be able to predict what the next challenge will be in life, you have a good idea of how you're going to react because of who you are and who your God is? Confidence. Security. Brethren, this might smack us around just a little bit, because we will often exalt, promote, esteem those among us who measure success in the wrong way. Us preachers can have a habit of trying to imitate the more renowned preachers so that maybe we can imitate their renown. Sometimes we as brethren will focus on those that seem to have more, be more esteemed, not because we desire to strengthen our relationship with God, and we're following after Philippians 3:17, mark them which walk so as you have us for examples. But we're marking examples, but the examples we're marking are ones that are going to gain us a material sense of success, position, clout. Heed these words again. You'll walk in your way safely. Your foot will not stumble. That is, your foot's not going to be trapped or ensnared. When we put wisdom, understanding, and knowledge before us as the goal, as the priority, we're going to have a different outlook. We're not going to spend our time trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're going to spend our time trying to follow along behind Jesus. We're not going to spend our time measuring success the way it seems to be measured in every new car commercial. We'll not spend our time looking at the worthwhile nature of our lives by pursuing the very things that Solomon investigated and declared to be vanity. See Ecclesiastes chapters 1 through 6. When we set wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, these attributes of who God is, as what we want to define us, because, by the way, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You'll understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. That's the successful life. Life to your soul, grace to your neck. That's a confident life. That's a life not spent looking over the shoulder, a life not spent fretting over what the next challenge might be, not because we're fearless of challenges, but because we're faithful toward our God. Verse 24, when thou liest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep shall be sweet. Let's leave the more easily compared extremes of morality and immorality. And let's go into some of these other areas where when wisdom is incorporated, we sleep more easily. There are brethren that are not necessarily in sin because of the debt that they've accumulated, but they've not made the wisest of decisions. And when they pillow their heads at night, they're really worried about finances because there are so many unknowns and so many additional variables based on their past decisions. There are those that when they pillow their heads at night, that they have more concern and anxiety because of the companions with whom they've surrounded themselves. Not because they've engaged in wrongdoing or done wrong, but because they find themselves being so absorbed in the lives of those who refuse to change. There are those that pillow their heads at night and have trouble sleeping because they're so worried about what's taking place in Washington and they're forgetting what's taking place in heaven. Do we need to have an eye on the world around us? Do we need to be an influence upon society around us? Do we need to be the kind of Christians that are wise enough to use our privilege to vote, but at the same time make sure that we're using our privilege to promote Christ and teach the gospel? Absolutely. Do we need to realize that our God has a standard of morality that is to impact us, to impact the society where we live, and we endeavor to try to impact that society so that it can reflect a standard of righteousness? Yes. At the same time, brethren, we don't have to look far to find some that know a whole lot more about Congress than they do the apostles. They could tell you a whole lot more about the previous president or the current president than they could about the life of Jesus Christ. They could tell you a lot more than the current president about the current president's previous 4-year term than they could about Jesus' 3-year ministry. And when they pillow their heads at night, they're so worried about the last thing that was said on MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News, and they agree with 1 out of the 3 or 2 out of the 3. And they spend their time wringing their hands and worrying over the material things of this life, instead of trusting in the one that gives confidence. Verse 25, be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. You don't have to be afraid of the consequences that the wicked bring upon themselves, because the Lord shall be your confidence. This section emphasizes confidence. When we set wisdom as our treasure, then God is our confidence, because wisdom has come from God. It was by wisdom that God put this place here. It's by wisdom that God holds this place together, that He supplies life and nourishes life in this place. And it's by wisdom that when we walk according to its standard, we can have a confidence. And our confidence isn't in our wisdom. It's not in ourselves, our knowledge, our intellect. Verse 26, the Lord shall be thy confidence, and keep thy foot from being taken. There's a colloquial phrase that we'll utilize. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but do we really believe that? Do we truly live that? Are we able to take confidence in tomorrow, not because we know what the stock market is going to do, not because we know what's going to happen regarding our health, or any sort of physical incident, accident, or tragedy that might occur? Do we take confidence in tomorrow because we not only know who holds tomorrow, we know who holds us? We know in whose hand we live, see John chapter 10. The Lord shall be thy confidence, and keep thy foot from being taken. Let's be careful. Let's be careful not to be the ones that are so focused on an exercise of financial wisdom and prudence and a knowledge of every aspect of the capitalist economy that we see anyone as foolish that doesn't quite understand every detail that we do. yet they're the ones that put a trust in God and hold to His way. Let's be careful not to be the ones that are so focused on the aspects of this world around us that are inconsequential, that we view as foolish those that aren't focused on the same things we are. Set wisdom as your treasure. It'll change your life. The Lord will be your confidence and keep your foot from being taken. Take all of this and back up to a statement that was made in verse 17. This is emphasizing the concept of wisdom and getting understanding. Length of days is in her right hand. Verse 16, her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. When we choose the fear of the Lord, when we follow after God's wisdom, there is not a single wise choice that a Christian will ever make that will contribute to that Christian suffering. He's not going to be the cause of it. Now, there are righteous choices that we will make that will result in us not dodging the suffering that a wicked world throws in our direction. But if the choice that I have to make is foolish in order to dodge something that's unpleasant, I'd rather be wise and face a difficult time than ungodly or foolish. And go back to Proverbs 1 for a moment. Proverbs 1 ends with the counsel that whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely and shall be quiet from fear of evil. That quiet, compare that with verse 32 rather. The turning away of the simple shall slay them. The prosperity, that is the careless ease or the complacency, a fool shall destroy them. Proverbs 1:32. There are indeed situations where the path of wickedness, the path of foolishness might result in a little bit of complacency. Sometimes it's because ignorance is bliss and we don't really realize what we're doing to ourselves. But ultimately that's what's leading to the downfall. There is never a sense in which a wise choice is going to be the reason for facing hardship. A wise choice is always the way of pleasantness, and the path is peace. It's simply the fact that we live in a world around us that doesn't want the wise, that doesn't want godly wisdom to enjoy pleasantness and peace. Thus, the pleasantness and peace isn't always promised in this life, but in the life to come. We come back to Proverbs 3. And this time we pick up at verse 27. Set my words in your heart. Set God as your priority. Set wisdom as your treasure. And by the way, when wisdom is our treasure, then our trust is in God. Our confidence is in God. Verse 27. Treat others as you should. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Pause. From them to whom it is due. The passage does not say, withhold not good from everyone that wants it. Withhold not good to them from whom it is due. Thus, implicit in the exhortation is discretion. The responsibility to decide, is this a situation where I need to be helping? Can that be a hard decision to make at times? Absolutely. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. When it's clear that we ought to be helping, but we opt not to help. And as a means of illustration, verse 28 says, say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I'll give when thou hast it by thee. There's something passive-aggressive. There is something subtly antagonistic in this means of behavior. Now, there is indeed a sense in which there are some that believe they have need, that they actually have wants, and they need to learn delayed gratification. That's not the conversation taking place in Proverbs 3, 27 and 28. There's indeed a scenario when a child, be it a 6-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 26-year-old, may come to a parent for help with something that the child's in a rush to have this, but maybe it's not something that ought to be had right now. Maybe it's something that it would be better for the child to work to be able to afford. A privilege that needs a little bit more delay before it can be enjoyed. There is a time when it needs to be said, come back and let's talk about this more fully. Come back and let's consider the circumstances in more detail. You come back and I'll help you, but that call for a return is going to be requiring responsibility on the one who makes the petition. Please understand, Proverbs 3, 27 and 28 is not saying that you're always wrong for telling someone that you can have help, but it's going to be delayed. The point here is when you're able to help, when the help is absolutely needed and it's needed at that time, don't be the one that makes someone else suffer just a little bit longer because you can. Say not to thy neighbor, I can go away for now. Come back later and I'll give. When thou hast the power, it's in the power of your hand to give it. Whatever the neighbor is needing, you've got it right there by you. Nah, I don't want to give it to you now. That's not always some sort of physical item. It's not always a quilt. It's not always a car. It's not always a bowl of sugar. It's not always a dollar bill. There are times that what the neighbor needs is compassion, a listening ear, a little bit of time. Time is a high-priced commodity in our world. It comes at a premium. There are times when what that neighbor needs is the compassion. Just a little bit of attention, a little bit of counsel. Come back and we'll talk about it later. This verse and passage and principle is powerful in that it requires us not only to survey a situation and arrive at a prudent conclusion about whether or not this is a real need, but also, do we have the power to help? Anyone ever had the power to help, but you didn't realize you had it? Anyone ever known you had the power to help, but for whatever reason it was withheld? Anyone ever not thought you had the power to help, but you went ahead and did it anyway, only to find out, hey, we could benefit this situation? Ever been the person that was treated in this way? The one that was in need, maybe not a material need, maybe it was some other sort of need. But the weight of your legitimate need was not important enough to the one that you besought for aid. Hey, husbands, we got to be careful. Because there are times that she's the one that needs the ear. Are we going to listen? Wives, it applies here too. There are times that he has a need in various aspects of the relationship. I'll come back later. Hey, parents, Anybody want to start to hang your head about like I do right now? We'll do it later. When it was something that was really important to them and it could have been handled. How do we treat others? Yes, the focus in this passage refers to the neighbor, but we can apply it to every relationship. Hey, children, particularly adult children, how hard is it for us to think of situations where we can apply this to the way that we treat the needs of our parents? Say not to thy neighbor, go, come again tomorrow, when you could do it right now. Now, not only is there the emphasis on a readiness to help, verse 29, devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. When your neighbor dwells confidently by thee, trustingly in your presence. As a matter of fact, the word translated securely is from the same root as the word translated safely. Back up in Proverbs 3:23. You'll walk in your way safely, securely. Your foot will not stumble. This idea of confidence, security. When we follow after true wisdom, God is our security and confidence. And if we follow after wisdom, then we're going to find ourselves being a source of security, confidence, safety for our neighbors. Hopefully, we don't violate that. Devise not evil against thy neighbor. The word translated devise carries the idea of either to engrave, to cut, to fabricate, or it can be used to describe the idea of to plow. Now, whether you want to think of it as plowing evil against your neighbor because you're planning on making a crop of ridiculing and harming your neighbor, or whether you want to think of it as fabricating, devising, creating, working out a pattern and a plan to your neighbor's downfall and hurt, however you want to describe it, because either one actually fits, the fact of the matter is don't. Don't devise evil against your neighbor, seeing he dwells securely by thee. Don't abuse those that trust you. Do we know the difference between a prankster and a bully? Do we? I don't think we always do. We're in the book of Proverbs. Go to Proverbs 26 for just a moment. Proverbs 26, verses 18 and 19. Who wants to read that for us? So is the man that lies to his neighbor, that fools his neighbor, that dupes his neighbor, that deceives his neighbor and says, oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. Am not I in sport? Anyone ever enjoyed a good prank? Anyone ever been the victim of something that could have been a prank, but the timing was bad? The delivery was wrong. The difference between a prankster and a bully is a prankster knows when to prank, but a bully's just going to do it no matter what. A bully's going to get his kicks and have his fun, and if it bothers you, then the problem's yours. And brethren, if you're a bully, you go ahead and repent. Now bring that back to Proverbs 3. Picking up at verse 29, devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. He's trusting you. He has confidence in you. There are some folks that they've been the prankster enough, or they thought they were being the prankster at the wrong time, that folks can't trust them. I can tell you some brethren I've met before that if they're in the room, I won't lay my phone down anywhere. They think they're being funny. I don't have time to go through and delete all the aggravating pictures they want to try to take when they pick it up. I've got better things to do with my life than to have to waste time deleting foolishness. There are folks that are going to find a way to inconvenience. Now, when done the right way and with the right tone and to the right extent, okay, that was a good one, man. But when done beyond any realm of reasonable discretion, devise not evil against thy neighbor, he dwelleth securely by thee, and before long you get to where you can't trust them. Verse 30, strive not with a man without cause, if he have done thee no harm. There are some folks that aren't happy unless they're mad. They're not fulfilled unless they are in some sort of contention. They're always looking for a reason to try to argue with someone else, find negatives in someone else. They'll harp on brethren about their behavior in this situation or that situation, not realizing how humiliating their behavior was when they wanted to harp, how divisive their harping was. Strive not with the man without cause. He's not done you any harm. You know, there comes a time that we need to step back and think, wait a minute. This might be something that needs to be addressed. This might be a behavior that needs to be remedied, but has this person really done harm? Could this be a growth opportunity instead of a war opportunity? We'll close there for tonight, and we'll finish chapter 3 and pick up with chapter 4 when next we meet. Thank you for your time this evening.